Joining me now, Caroline Glick. She is International Affairs Advisor to the Prime Minister of Israel. Appreciate your joining us, ma'am. Give us a sense of what has been a dramatic day. Are we to understand that the Israeli government, Prime Minister Netanyahu and the cabinet is fully backing now this peace plan that could result in a ceasefire in Gaza? Is that now a done deal, as Donald Trump calls it, ma'am?
Well, look, thank you for having me on your program. And Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Donald Trump agreed to the 20-point plan, the 20-stage plan for resolving this conflict at the White House when they met there last week. And what we're seeing now is the implementation of the first stage of that 20-point plan. The first point in that plan is the release of all of the hostages that Hamas has been unlawfully holding for the past 2 years. So, let's make sure that we get through that, and then we'll begin the discussions on implementing the next stage. But I think it's very clear that we have to get through this stage first. This is the most important stage right now to show that Hamas is willing to end the ongoing crime against humanity that it's been carrying out for 2 years, holding innocent people hostage in the hope of extorting and bringing the Jewish state to its knees, something it has not achieved at all. And so I think that we're moving towards that right now.
You're saying that Hamas is the one which has held these hostages
Yes.
In captivity for 2 years. In turn, Palestinian voices say, look at the 66,000 people who've died, many of them women and children because of Israeli bombings. There still seems to be a lot of mistrust. How are you going to overcome that mistrust? Is this plan good enough to overcome the mistrust, or is this only a temporary ceasefire?
Let's get the 48 hostages home. Let's, if you want to build trust with the Jewish state, then why don't you let out the people that you seized illegally 2 years ago and have been torturing for the past 2 years? After we do that, then we'll see. It's about building trust, and the most fundamental thing here is to end the atrocity that began on October 7th, and that means letting out all of the hostages that still remain in Hamas captivity, the 21 that are alive and the 28 that Hamas murdered.
But the fact is, Caroline Glick, the truth of the matter also is that the Palestinians want guarantees. They want guarantees that Israel will not resume bombings once the hostages are handed over. Is there any such guarantee that you are willing to give at this stage? Or is it a case of verifying to see whether Hamas has been disarmed before you are willing to give any kind of guarantee today?
Right. I mean, look, Hamas is a terrorist organization. It's been running a de facto Palestinian state in Gaza since 2005. This is what they came up with. They came up with October 7th after 20 years of effective Palestinian sovereignty over this area, the first time there was ever a Palestinian state. And, what we said, what the prime minister said, the first day of the war, he said, these are the 3 goals of this war. We're going to bring all of the hostages home. We're going to end Hamas as a military organization and as a regime in Gaza. And we're going to prevent Gaza from ever posing a threat to Israel in the future. And this deal that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu agreed to last week at the White House, and that has the support of basically the entire Arab world and much of the Islamic world, says that these goals are all going to be achieved under this 20-point plan. So the first thing that has to be achieved is the release of the hostages. And then we're going to go on from there. But part of preventing Hamas from threatening Israel again is for Hamas to be disarmed. And each of these steps have to be implemented. They have to be verified. And then we can move on to the next one. But that's the concept of the Trump plan. Again,
no, but you're not willing to give me,
plan.
you're not willing to give the world a guarantee at this stage that the bombings will not resume, because that is the fear in a way that Palestinian or Hamas negotiators have, that they give up, they hand over the hostages, and the next thing you know, Israel will resume the bombings. Is there any guarantee that you're willing to give? Because the peace plan clearly envisages Israel pulling back behind a certain line in Gaza.
All right, so we're going to continue to be in control of 53% of the territory in Gaza in order to ensure that Hamas is disarmed and that its regime is over and that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel, the way that it did, the way that it attacked us, the way that Hamas invaded us on October 7th and carried out a one-day genocide.
But how will
So
you
it's very
ensure that,
important
ma'am?
for us to ensure
How
that.
will you ensure that who will decide that Hamas has been disarmed? The Israeli, the IDF will decide that?
I think that it's very clear in the plan that we agreed to with President Trump, and that has the support of the entire Arab world and the Islamic world, that the steps that have to be taken are very clear to everybody. And what we need to do now is to ensure that Hamas is disarmed and it is no longer in charge of Gaza. And then we can move on to ensuring that Gaza never again threatens Israel the way that it did on October 7th. And that's the deal that everybody has signed on to. And obviously there's a lot of distrust. We were invaded. We absorbed a one-day genocide on the hands of barbaric terrorists from Hamas. And as has been the vision of Prime Minister Netanyahu, which is now being implemented at the table, and God willing, we'll see by Monday all of the hostages home and with their families for the first time in 2 years. And the hostages that were murdered, they will finally be able to be laid to rest on the soil of the state of Israel. When that happens, we'll be in a different situation.
But
until now, you have to understand, until now, Hamas thought that holding these people, these innocent people hostage in horrible, horrific conditions and starving them and torturing them, that this was their ace in the hole, that the longer that they held them, the greater their chances of emerging victorious. And the big change that happened, both as a result of the heroic fight of our soldiers and also because of the visionary leadership of both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, Hamas now realizes that the opposite is the case. Far from being their ace in the hole, the hostages are dictating their demise. And if they want to survive in any way, shape, or form on this land, on this earth, then they have to give them up. And that's really where we've arrived at today. Again, thanks to all of the forces that I laid out, President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and the Israeli Defense Forces. So
I'll come to Prime Minister Netanyahu and President. Ma'am, I'll come to Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump in a moment, but you mentioned the horrors perpetrated by Hamas. What about the argument being made, and it's been made by global agencies, of genocide and war crimes in Gaza? The fact is, these are words that have been used by internationally recognized bodies. 66,000 people at least killed, many of them women and children. Does Israel also recognize that maybe your response was completely disproportionate, some would argue, to what happened on October 7th?
No, I mean, I guess a disproportionate response would be, something even worse. Crimes against humanity greater than what Hamas enacted on October 7th. They burned babies alive. I mean, what's worse than that? No.
Well, what is worse is
what we've done is we have carried out
bombing innocent civilians. Bombing innocent civilians.
We have not taken it on to we never, ever harm civilians on purpose. We have the lowest ratio of combatants to civilians killed in the history of modern warfare. Israel makes more effort to prevent unnecessary deaths of civilians than any military has in world history.
So you deny the charges of malnutrition, of people being denied food, basic amenities, of the bombings of schools and hospitals. All of that is denied.
What we deny is any charge of crimes against humanity, genocide, or any of those like kind of charges. The average caloric intake that we provided for the people of Gaza is 3,000 calories per day. Okay, the only people being starved to death in Gaza are the hostages, and that is the simple, plain truth. That is the simple, plain truth.
I want to ask you, you said Prime Minister Netanyahu's plan. Many believe this is President Trump's plan, which Netanyahu was forced to accept. There's a lot of hostility towards it within your right-wing coalition partners in Israel itself, and apparently Trump put a red line saying, Bibi, you cannot control the world anymore. Is it true that this has been done under pressure, under duress, and President Trump is the one who's driven this plan?
No, it's not true that it's been done under pressure. It's been done in partnership. It's been done as part of the extraordinary alliance between the State of Israel and the United States of America under the leadership of President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. There's no truth whatsoever to the claims that that Netanyahu had to be dragged to the negotiating table. And I think that President Trump himself has been asked about that question repeatedly, and each time he responds in the negative, that no, indeed, this is not true, this is not the case, and that those claims are being made by people who have a certain political agenda in mind when they make it, but it's not true.
Do you believe that Donald Trump should get the Nobel Prize? We are told Benjamin Netanyahu also feels he should get it. Should Donald Trump be getting the Nobel Prize, or is that premature until this truce really holds? Is it premature to suggest that Donald Trump should get a Nobel Prize?
No, not at all. I mean, we nominated, the Prime Minister nominated President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize back in April already. We are very firm in our belief that if anybody deserves that prize, it's President Trump. And we just like to say God bless him for his leadership and for his support and friendship to the state and people of Israel, and for his partnership with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Together, those two visionary leaders have brought the world to a much safer place than it was before.
My final question, ma'am. The Palestinian guests I've had over the last few days on the show have said a two-state solution, Israel and a Palestinian state next to each other, is the only way for permanent peace. Is Israel willing to accept that? 140 countries have recognized it. Many of your allies in recent weeks have also recognized the Palestinian state. Is that the final solution? This is only the temporary plan. Eventually, we have to go towards a two-state solution?
No, we don't believe that. We saw what the two-state solution looked like on October 7th. Again, there was a de facto Palestinian state in Gaza since Israel pulled out of Gaza, expelled all of its civilians, peaceful farmers who had been living in Gaza for over a generation, brought them all out, took out all of our military forces, and Hamas transformed Gaza into Afghanistan under the Taliban. And we're not going to risk that again. Not in Gaza, not in Judea and Samaria. No.
Okay. Caroline Glick, on what has been a momentous day and hopefully will bring some kind of peace to a troubled region. I appreciate you joining me on my show tonight. Thank you very much. Caroline Glick, who is in the Prime Minister's office, the government of Israel, joining us there.